Thank you so much for going down memory lane with me. Let me take you back to my years of high school. That would be 1989 to 1992. Hall monitor, her name is Mrs. Arrington. She had a mustache, just a mustache, not as thick as mine, of course, but a mustache nonetheless. We called her the Stash Monster. People would, kids would run in through the hall, or walk through the hallways after the bell rang. She'd sit in a little desk there in the hallway. She'd see them, and they would yell, "Stash!" And she'd go running after him. She could run pretty fast. Mrs. Arrington was the monitor for detention. Mrs. Arrington she had a speech that she said every time that she had detention, or that detention would start. So, good afternoon, my name is Mrs. Arrington. I'm your monitor for detention. You aren't here. Doesn't matter if someone's going in, coming out, calling your name, what have you. There were no noises of any kind, pencils, pens, feet, or what have you. Knocking, patting, cracking, popping, drumming, snapping. No noises of any kind. And you're ready to go on. Well, one day in detention, I sat there and I was like, squeaking like that. She'd look, and I'd go. She's like, "Roger." "Yeah, Mrs. Arrington." "Get out." "Do what?" "Good night." "What'd I do?" "Good night, Roger." "Well, you'd have to leave. If she caught you making noise or talking or whatever, she'd tell you to get out, or good night." Well, 218 was the exact name of the room where you had the study hall. There was some big windows in the back, and during the summer, and she had it hung up there. And Mrs. Arrington, the windows were open. So when I went out the doors, down the steps and out the doors there, I yelled for her as I got out by the front of the school there, by the 218 room. I yelled, "Mrs. Arrington! Mrs. Arrington!" She come out the window. She goes, "What do you want, Roger? I told you good night. Get out of here. Go home." I said, "I just want to let you know that I'm leaving. Goodbye. Good night." Like I said, with Mr. Sheets, I had more attention more times than one. But you look back on Mrs. Arrington, and you just, her mustache. So we called her Stash Monster. Her mustache got you. Her mustache was something everybody laughed at. We called her Stash Monster and everything else. And Mrs. Arrington was just funny. She had her little speech for detention and everything, and everybody laughed about her and everything about the detention. And in the yearbook there with that detention stuff I told previously that Mr. Sheets had signed there my junior year, it had her little speech in there, which I mentioned earlier. But it's just one of those things you look back on and you reminisce about Mrs. Arrington. And people, I bet you if I was to talk about, if I was to ask some of my classmates or whatever, hell, I could even ask my cousin Sean about Mrs. Arrington, and they would say, "You mean Stash?" And they would laugh it up. Thank you so much for going down memory lane with me. I'll catch you next time.